All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Judge. Welcome to the June installment of the W. Brent Bergen Lunch and Learn lecture series. Before we get started, a couple announcements. We have a new exhibit in the Red Rose Gallery by way of water, reviving and reimagining Catawba art forms. It's by 4 young Catawba artists. Please have a look at that. Next month on July 25th, the Lunch and Learn will be by Carol Higgins. She's a associate teaching professor at UNC Charlotte, and she's going to be talking about the Dawes family and the reform of citizenship. Henry Dawes was considered an Indian reformer, and the Dawes Act is now used. Anybody on the Dawes roll is now officially a member of an Indian tribe. And she's going to talk about that, which I think will be really interesting. Today, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. James Scurry. Jim is a good friend of mine. He started his career as an archaeologist. We lost him to geography, but as you all know, those are very related fields. He had a professor, John Winbury, who I had as an undergraduate, who was the product of a joint anthropology geography department at LSU. Jim has worked for Fish and Wildlife Service in Louisiana. We became better friends when he was the director of IT for Natural Resources, statewide director there. Jim retired. He's not ready to slow down. He wanted to know if I wanted to get involved in some projects. And I really did, because skills in GIS and LIDAR and mapping to look at Lake Wateree. And so that's what we've been doing. This is preliminary results of what is going to probably be a very long-term project. At this point, Jim's probably worked a solid month-long spread out on getting the maps and information together that we'll look at today. So without further ado, let's get going here. We call this laser beams and old maps. So I heard through the grapevine from all of you probably that they were going to drop the level of the lake. And I'm always excited when they drop the level of the lake because it might expose archaeological sites. So we asked Duke Energy through our friend Rick Duran, who many of you probably know, are they going to fly the lake with LIDAR, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they said, yes, we're going to do that. So then we had to get permission. And when a big energy company and the university get together, you might imagine it goes to the legal office. So we were able to work out a licensing agreement and non-distribution clause from USC legal representatives and Duke Energy. And then we asked them if they would give us 9 sample areas of the lake so that we could look with the LIDAR and see if we could see any archaeology. Now, some of you have probably seen this map before. Blanding. Blanding was a medical doctor in Camden. He arrived from Massachusetts in 1806. Was interested in antiquities and Native Americans, and pretty soon mapped 9 mound complexes in about a 25-mile radius of Camden. These mounds are artificially created structures. Often the chief's house was on top of these mounds. They were the central part of large villages, and there's a number of them clustered here in the Wateree Valley. And there's a number of other things of interest that he mapped, like villages, a stone mortar, and what he called a fortification. So this is superimposing Lake Wateree, which was built about 1918. They flood the Catawba River, and this is probably the best preserved of the mounds that would have been here in the Wateree. This is Adamson Mound. It's located just west of the town of Camden. That's Dr. Chest Walker doing gradiometer, where you look into the ground and try to find features like structures. And so this is the best preserved one. When they flooded Lake Wateree, they flooded 2 of the mounds that Blanding mapped. One is Harrison's Mound. We know where that is. And there's another one near White Oak Creek, and that one we don't know where it is. In this artist's rendition, this is what we think these mound towns would have looked like. I got to work with an artist as part of the Liberty Trail. I know a lot of you are aware of the Liberty Trail. It's a driving tour with a phone app of the Revolution in South Carolina. And one of those places you go to is Fort Watson, which was a fort the British built on top of one of these Indian mounds It's now adjacent to Lake Marion, which was built in the 1940s. But you have the central feature of the mound in the center there, a palisade wall around the central part of the village. There's a plaza area kind of in the middle. It's got this large pole. These are central features of these mound towns across the Southeast. People may have stood there and given lectures. Maybe they displayed things hanging on it. It's kind of like Meet Your Mother at the Rocket at the State Fair. It's a central place. Everyone knows what you're talking about. There's smaller mounds inside the complex, and then houses. And then, of course, outside would be small hamlets, people fishing, hunter camps at a distance from the main town. Now, one of the features on Blanding's map is called the stone mortar. This is up around Liberty Hill, and this is Jim and Sunshine Smith inspecting this mortar. Blanding says that this was in use in the early 19th century. The colonists, he says, are grinding their corn in it, and he thinks it's of great antiquity, so we don't know if this is something that was made by Native Americans. There's 2 others in the area on private property as well. So there's 3 total of these things, but we're not exactly sure who made them, but this is mapped by Blanding. It's B there on the map. Let me go back real quick. You see A on the other side of the river. This is Harrison's Mound. Harrison's Mound was flooded in 1918. And one of my first volunteers here at the Native American Study Center was Henry Shute. And it was months after he was coming by once a week and working in the lab. He said, "You know about the mound under Lake Watery?" And I said, "Henry, you waited 4 months to tell me about this?" He said, "It didn't occur to me." I said, "Well, yeah, I'm kind of interested in it." He said, "Well, we've been diving on it, my son and my daughter. We found all kinds of cool stuff." And these are some of the things that Henry found. On the top right there is a clay pipe. That's 3 views of it. You got a face facing you. If I was smoking it, you would see a face. There's also faces where the ears would be. And when Henry showed this to me, I got real excited because I kind of had an idea who this person was, believe it or not. There's a folk tale, a hero myth told by the Sioux on the Plains about a guy named He Who Gets Hit with Deer Lungs. I don't know how he got that name. He who gets hit with deer lungs is one of 10 brothers. He's the youngest. His father's been beheaded and taken to the underworld. He has a race with his 10 brothers. He wins, and the chief says, "You can marry my daughter." He says, "No, I've got stuff to do. She can marry my older brother." And she does. And then he goes to the underworld, returns with his father's head. His father comes back to life. And when he does, he has faces on his ears. And if someone looks in those ears, in the faces on the ears, the eyes light up and you die. So I think this is a rendering of this, of the guy who changes his name to He Who Wears Faces on Ears. He's also known as Redhorn, and he's also associated with the planet Venus for some unknown reason. Here's a map down here. This is a map done by what was then called Watery Power, when they're buying up the land to make the lake. And they actually show the Indian mound, Harrison's Mound, that Henry's been diving on. There's also a series of pottery here with this little appendage on it. We think this might be a Helgramite. It's a larval stage of a Dobson fly. It's a critter that lives in 3 worlds. And as you understand Native American cosmology, there's 3 worlds: sky, earth, and the underworld. And things are supposed to stay in their world. And the Dobson fly is a land creature, a water creature, and an air and a sky feature. So it's three worlds. So that mound, we know where that is. The second mound G here is somewhere below downriver of White Oak Creek. And no one knows where that one is yet. And this is one of the reasons we wanted to see if the LiDAR would work to find this. The piece of pottery that you see there is a type of pottery that is made in the 16th century. And that's the kind of pottery that would be made by the Indians who were invaded by Spanish explorers in the 16th century. Hernando de Soto in May of 1540, Juan Pardo in 1566, again in 1568. And the governor of St. Augustine sends a guy named Pedro Torres to investigate reports of Europeans on horseback in 1627. He comes up, He goes back. He says, I didn't see anything. The governor says, you weren't there long enough. Go back. He doesn't find anybody. But it's possible that scouts out of Jamestown might have been looking around the area at that point and are observed. So we've never found where the Spanish visited. The Indians at Cofetacheki, what the town was called here in the 16th century. And with that piece of pottery in the White Oak Creek drainage, wonder out loud, could Mound G be where they were and is now under the lake? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to talk about LIDAR and GIS.
Thanks, Chris. And I will say I've known Chris a long, long time. And it's my honor and pleasure to work with him and be associated with the Native American Studies Center and to present to all of you. And I hope I won't put you to sleep with this. I will say that. Sometimes it puts me to sleep, so I won't be offended if you did. But we wanted to just show you a little bit of the technology that was involved in looking in this. Obviously, when you've got a flooded environment or a highly vegetated environment, it's tough to see cultural resources or even natural features in those landscapes. So technology's been developed. Oops. Missed the.
Just click there.
Can't even run technology. I'm supposed to be a technology person. It's hard to do left-handed for me. But what is LIDAR? Well, LIDAR stands for detection and ranging. It's a technology that is an active sensor. And what that means, it generates its own light, a laser beam in the infrared portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then this technology measures how much time it takes for that beam to hit a feature and return up to the sensor itself. It doesn't penetrate things. If you've ever read anything about it, it's like, oh, it can see through trees, it can see through, it doesn't. It doesn't penetrate. It doesn't penetrate water. But there is a thing called green LIDAR that will penetrate water depending on how much sediment is in the water. And around here, everybody who's ever dove, fished, or gone through any of our rivers or creeks know they're pretty muddy. So it would not work that well here. I have heard that in Scandinavia, where you got, crystal glacier fed rivers, works really well and can go down as much as 100 feet. So no such luck with us, but it can see night and day because it generates its own light. It can see night and day. It can go through some haze. Fog messes it up because fog absorbs the light itself. This is an example. If you look from the top down, you'd say there's no way you can get a laser beam through this forest. But if you look from the bottom up, you'll see there's a lot of open space. So those light beams come down through that open space and then hit either limbs, tree trunks, the ground, buildings, whatever, and they return pulses, and you can determine elevations from that. I swear, maybe I should start doing, I should just use my right hand. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's right.
The components to LIDAR, the GPS, and y'all know about your cars, your phones, everything has a global positioning system in it, and it measures where you are on the Earth's surface at all times. There's a thing called an IMU, and it registers the airplane's roll, pitch, the XY, where it's going, because if you tilt a plane and the beam's shooting, it's going to affect the return on that. So there's technology that controls for the pitch and roll and yaw and all the various elements of an airplane. And the third element is the laser finder itself. That's what's generating a pulse. When we did the whole state of South Carolina back in like 2008 to about 2015, about 300,000 pulses per second, which is a lot, but that was high end. Now, some of them can get well over 1 million. So a lot of light coming down through that. I briefly touched on this. I won't go into it a lot. How it works, the pulse comes down, that's recorded as time 1. It hits something, it returns back, that's time 2. And so you can calculate the amount of time, and knowing where the plane is, the amount of time it takes to hit the ground, then you can generate a surface from that. And this is just an illustration. These beams come down, they may hit limbs here, all the way down to the ground, and you get multiple returns off of these things. So return one, the first one back, second, third, and fourth. If 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all the same value in return, you know you've hit a solid object. You've either hit bare earth ground or you've hit the top of a building that can't be penetrated. Otherwise, you can get partial returns through leaves and gaps in trees and those types of things. So when you go to look at it, this is what it looks like top view. You see all these points that came down. The blue ones are the ones that were bottom only. But then when you look at the side, you can see that you've got returns from the top of the trees and then the ones on the ground. And a lot of forestry people will use the first, second, third returns to do tree canopy height, forest density, those kinds of things. So there's a lot more to LiDAR than just finding the ground. But in our area of interest, we wanted the ground points. We want to find what the ground looks like without anything on it. So these green dots are the ones, these are the ground points. You see there's nothing in here. Those points that hit buildings have been removed. Points that hit upper story vegetation have been removed. Still in the database, but we pull those out so we can find just the ground. That's what we're looking for this. One thing I want to point out, LiDAR is not an analytical system. You may hear or read what it can do or not do. All it does is capture data. You need some other software like a GIS image processing system or some other tools to be able to go in and actually analyze that data. And that's what Chris and I did. I took the tools, took the raw LiDAR data, built the bare earth surface, and then we used other tools to go in and inspect it. And just to give you a quick, this is an old slide that I've had from my days at Fish and Wildlife Service, but just to show you, this piece of ground has all these things going on, right? And a GIS is a lot like peeling back an onion. Every layer of skin is some information. It could be the vegetation, it could be the archaeology, it could be the soils, it can be the land cover, whether it's an industrial site or an ag field or whatever the case may be. And because it's referenced to the earth, these layers stack up and you can actually analyze the relationships between data. And that's what we had to do with our stuff. So I'll skip over that. So Chris is going to talk a little bit about what does a mound look like with LiDAR when you're looking down at one.
So the first step was, if we're going to try to find a mound under the lake, what do they look like? And we know where there's some standing. So like, all right, let's look at the LiDAR and let's see what that what it gives us. And so this is Adamson Mound. This is the one that I showed you earlier, west of Camden. And there's actually 3 mounds there, but this is the big one right here. And you see the painfully flat where there would have been a structure or multiple structures on top of it. So we're like, all right, so this is what a mound looks like. And our hope was we would go to the known mound, Lake Watery Harrison's Mound, and be able to find it by searching for something that looked like that. And then unfortunately, the Blue Line LiDAR was unable to do that. This is another one that's mapped by Blanding down below Camden. It's been plowed for a couple hundred years and it's kind of more pushed around, but you can definitely see that there is a feature right here of some kind. And so that's another model of what we might look for. And then this is the Santee Indian Mound, which is on Lake Merriam. And if you notice the Adamson Mound and this looks quite alike. There's a second one here, and this actually might be a third one that we didn't know about that the LiDAR was able to show up. So we go and we look where the known mounds are to give us a sense in looking at the things we're going to show you in a minute, what that all might look like. Back to you.
All right. we're playing tag team here, obviously. Chris mentioned at the very beginning when we talked to Duke, we identified 9 sample areas, and it was based on where major creeks and streams came into the Wateree River originally. So we wanted to get those intersection areas and see how much the water lowering would show us in that regard. So these are our sample units, everything from Big Wateree Creek down to the dam itself. We call the dam Northeast, the White Oak Creek area, Colonel's Creek, Beaver Creek on through there. So those were our sample areas. What we did technically in the LiDAR sequence is we got the point cloud data, and you saw the green dots, what the point clouds are, and we generated a digital elevation model from those points. So what that does is build a computer continuous surface framework to show you the elevations. And then from the elevations, we're able to generate a hillshade. And what a hillshade does is illuminates that DEM, that digital elevation model, and shows shadows. And those shadows will show features that aren't necessarily visible from the bare earth. So this DEM was generated from all the points that we collected for Beaver Creek sample unit, and then we generated the hillshade. And what Chris and I went through looking way in was the hillshade. And then as we saw something, we had some aerial photography. We wanted to see if the aerial photography would show it, and then if we could make out what it was from the aerial photography. We ended up, anything that was a red dot that we flagged, we said, yeah, we need to see that on the ground. Green dots, they're anomalies, but we think they're either natural or a recent kind of feature. We initially flagged 275 anomalies. And again, to point out, these are anomalies. We don't really know what they are.
Points of interest.
Points of interest, exactly. Some of the anomalies were above the flood pool, but we thought, man, that's a bizarre looking thing out there. Maybe we should, as we're going other places, see if we can find that as well. And then we, out of all the points, anomalies, we identified 55 locations that we thought were really high interest, that somewhere, sometime, somebody needs to go look at. So just to show you a map, these are those same 9 sample units. The red are the ones we want to go look at, and the green are the ones that, if you're in the vicinity, maybe you can take a look. And it's interesting to note to me that you see a lot up in the Big Wateree Creek area up in here, you see a lot more red. And I think that's a function, not so much that that those are better sites or anomalies, more the fact that that's the upper reaches of the lake. And as water comes down, more ground surface is exposed than closer to the dam. You know, you get close to the dam and lowering it 5-10 feet. It means something, but it's not nearly as impactful as lowering it 5 or 10 feet on the upper reaches. So just to keep in mind that we flagged a lot, but it does not necessarily mean that there's more things of interest per se. We flagged some of these, and I told Chris, I'm gonna tell this. I was a big Saturday Night Live fan back in the 70s, and Steve Martin and Bill Murray had this skit where they're in New York City and they're just sitting there, and one of them looks over and says, "What is that?" And the other one says, "I don't know." And he said, "Oh, I know what that is." And then he turned back and say, "What the hell is that?" So it goes back and forth, back and forth. Chris and I had some "what the hell is that" moments in this thing. So you'll see some "what is that?" And we flagged those "what is that?" just to try to figure out what it was. This is and we'll both chime in on this. So this is a 3 cluster anomaly, and you can see this circular feature here And you can see on the, let me point out, on the left is the aerial photography. So there's, even lowering it down, there's still some water in there. So it was shallow enough that we could pick it up with LiDAR. And there's either a road or a dam, an old submerged dam or something in there. And then there's this little feature.
That kind of looks like a mound,
Kind of looks like a mound.
but it's small. Everything to the right of the white line is underwater when the
Right.
lake is high.
Right, exactly, right. Our second one is just a remnant landform. And while the major focus was trying to find mound sites, we also, as archaeologists, keep in mind of, there were, occupants of this area long before the mound building group. And so there are other landforms that may have early archaic, middle archaic, late archaic woodland, some other occupation. And this one stands out being a remnant left high when the lake was there. Now, obviously the lake wasn't there, but during pre-contact times, but people often are using the higher elevations, higher portions of the landscape above the rivers and creeks and the things surround them. So that was one that was of interest to us as well. This one was really interesting. It's right in a little creek floodplain, but it's this rectangular built up feature. No idea what that is. And I will point out, we mentioned to one gentleman, if anybody recognizes any of this stuff, feel free to raise your hand and say, oh, I know what that is. Okay. Yeah. So, but that was an interesting feature.
Yeah.
Another rounded mound looking area, 14 by 13 meters across it. So it's getting a little bigger than some of the others. Maybe worn down, maybe plowed before the lake, all those kinds of things, or maybe it's just some other kind of remnant. Pretty symmetrically round to be just a remnant.
And then I'll point out that in the mounds that we're talking about today are from the Mississippian period, from about 1,000 years to European contact. In the 500 years before that, there were smaller mounds that were built. Many of them were burial mounds. So this could be what we call a woodland period mound. Not the one we're looking for, but we'll take it.
Right. Another just a large rounded area. I did put in the DEM on top of this hillshade just to show that the levels of elevation, the lighter green to the blues are increasing elevation. So there is some level of elevation in that feature.
And then pre-contact folks, from about 10,000 years ago to about 3,000 years ago, really like these high areas, high, flat, well-drained, and then water on both sides, which you see here.
Right. This one is a known site. We just threw that one in. That's a site that's recorded at the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology on one of those similar landforms, but you can tell from the road in here, it's probably developed around it. It's probably development sitting on top of it. But the other thing to point out, you can see other features, like you see these coming in, and we have actually used LiDAR to find old Revolutionary War, Civil War roads around battle sites and those kinds of things. So it's quite a useful tool.
Yeah. And then the little ones might be rocks.
Yeah, right.
Up in this area, there's a lot of rock exposed, and they could be individual rocks. But this landform looks just like the previous one, and this has a Native American occupation from 10,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago.
This was an interesting cluster, and this one we think is rock. But as Chris pointed out from some of his other work, there's a quartz quarry up in Lancaster that we're in Lancaster, but yeah, from the place where this was, that is a quarry, and that would be the same kind of signature you would get for that, even though it's just angular rock.
Yeah, so this is prehistoric tool grade quartz that was made into spear points and arrowheads.
And you can see on the left, it is a wooded environment. So it's not known construction, rubble or anything like that.
No, that's in the very northern part of the county.
This was a little isolated anomaly,
Small.
little moundy type thing. You can, in 2020, I forgot how far the lake was down by then, but you can see it showing up, in that. I think, yeah, I can't remember when the lowest part of it was. I think it was beginning to come back up, or this probably wouldn't have picked up this much. This was one of the, what is that?
What the hell is that?
We saw this thing with a line through it. We didn't have this particular imagery at the time, so we're looking at that going, what in the world is that? But then when you look at it, it's something associated with these houses or this driveway or something like that. Probably mulch or something that's been put out there and just happened to be out there at the time that the LiDAR was flown. This one was another one that really baffled us. I mean, it was a real, what is that? And you can see the 2020 imagery that we had, there was nothing there. Which we also didn't know at the time. We saw this and went, what is that? And then we got the two different dates of imagery where it wasn't here in 2020 and then it was here. Looks to me kind of like hay bales, something like that, looking at it. But we just wanted to show it to you, not saying that's an archaeological site, but saying this is the kind of things you pick up with LiDAR and with aerophotography that can really help in the process. Could it be? I guess it could be, because it's not really uniform like a hay bale. I mean, most of those things are pretty standard, those big rolls of hay. I don't know what, I mean, we don't know what it is, quite honestly.
Bundles of pine needles?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, the red color is kind of interesting. This was another isolated landform along those same lines as some of the others. This one we thought was real interesting. This was in one of the upper parts, this circular with these internal anomalies. And again, now this is the water is coming back up, but you can still see little remnants of it as the water is coming back up. It's near these real flat gray surfaces are the actual waters, creeks, streams adjacent to the former creek, streams, etc., that are adjacent to what was land. So whatever this is situated in a place that we know have traditionally contained Native American sites. So, and it's like almost 30 by 30 meters. So it's a pretty good area. I think it's a good target to go out and look at some point.
Yeah, it might be agricultural terracing, even something like that.
Right.
That's why we have to ground truth things.
Right. I'd have to look on that one.
In Colonel's Creek, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. Marker 63 was lower down. Yeah, I think it's around Colonel's Creek area. Just another interesting anomaly. We thought, yeah, could that be some kind of trench environment that's filling in with these internal anomalies here? Who knows? Again, near a major remnant stream. So is something coming off of that? You sometimes hear of settlements that were surrounded by palisades, walls, ditches, and those kinds of things. So we're just throwing it out there as needing to look at. This was we first saw that and went, wow. But then as Chris said, well, this is clearly a rock when you go over and look at the aerial
Yeah.
photograph. But if you looked at that just by itself, we're going, man, that's something we definitely have to look at.
Yeah.
And LiDAR doesn't discriminate. I mean, it's gonna reflect whatever's down there. So it's not smart enough to know that that's a rock, right? That's up for us to decide. This one was interesting. This was up in the Big Watery Creek area. And it's a series of circular features that are underwater, and you can even see it. The water's shallow enough that you can see those circular features going around.
And then a more squared one.
And then, yeah, there's several anomalies out in here that show up in that area. This was down in the White Oak Creek area. And I'd love to know if anybody knows what this thing is. I mean, there's some feature with cross cuts and then some raised points, irregularly oval, near a former, right adjacent to a former stream, and even some stuff over here. That could be that's dock related, I think. Anyway, that's one that we thought definitely deserved some kind of look whenever there's an opportunity. Also in the White Oak Creek area, this rectangular feature here, obviously dug down at some point, maybe, and some mounding around it. This may very well be some kind of historic, foundation thing that was dug or something like that. We don't know. But again, it's also out in the woods. So these are things that are away from current settlement. So whatever it is, it was there a while back. And I'm gonna let Chris talk about this one. This was our biggie. So
the moment you've all been waiting. So recall on Blanding's map, there was what he called the ancient earthwork. It's marked as D. It's between White Oak Creek and Beaver Creek. He says it's a little below the mouth of the creek, an old fortification of oblong form consisting of a wall and a ditch. The embankment is now not more than 3 feet high above the level of the plain. The ditch is distinct. Now, my first thought on this was, when I first saw the map years and years ago, maybe that's some kind of Rev War or Civil War fortification. But if you were defending the position on the river, the opening would be on the other side. So that kind of rules that out. Up in Ohio, you're probably familiar with the Serpent Mound and all these kind of really incredible geometric earthworks. Many of them have openings that align with equinoxes and solstice. These are thought to have been ritual areas where Native people would gather for certain kind of activities. The villages are usually at a distance from these places. They're nearby, but there's not really people living at these. And a lot of these preserve quite well. This one has the 17th golf course. You see the white flag in the middle of it. And golfers looking for their balls. But there is that little opening that goes off to the side. And that made me curious about that. And of course, up there, they have also used LiDAR. And on that previous White Oak Creek one, right, there's circles and squares. And this is what these things kind of look like. And in a kind of an artist's rendition of what these may have looked like, places where people would gather inside, defined space, interior space would be ritual, the village is at a distance. And so it's possible that this is some kind of earthwork. We don't know of any of these in South Carolina. There are some in Georgia. There's some in the mid-Atlantic, but those are really the closest ones. And it may be that we just have not identified them. It may be that they've been plowed away by agricultural activities, but possible that LiDAR, if you're all familiar with the shell rings at the coast from about 4,500 years ago. They've been using LiDAR to find, we knew about 15 of them, and now they have found dozens more by looking at the LiDAR that are not very high on the ground. And so it's possible that this would be related to that. It might be a pen that someone built to keep their bull in. I don't know. But again, we've got to go out and ground truth these things. But that one, it's in the right location for where blending drew that. It's roughly the right shape. And so that's one of the ones. And oddly enough, that was the very first thing we found in this project. And it was all downhill from there.
Right.
I'll let you summarize.
Yeah, so I think the point we want to make in this is, at least from a technology perspective from mine, LiDAR has really been a game changer in archaeology. It really has. And we've used it in South Carolina. The collective, we have used it extensively. I know one of Chris's colleagues works in Mayan areas of Mexico, where it's extremely dense vegetation. And some of the unknown features, canals, agricultural fields, pyramids that are under jungle have been discovered with LiDAR. And so it really has changed the nature, as other remote sensing tools have as well. Chris mentioned gradiometer, ground penetrating radar, all these kind of things are ways that you can try to evaluate a site without having to destroy a site. And I think and that's important, because once you excavate it, it's gone, right? And so if we can use technology to at least pinpoint some areas that need to be looked at, then I think that helps a lot. In this project, as I said, we found 256 anomalies. 55 of them we think need more investigation. And as Chris mentioned, Duke lowers and raises the lake quite every so many years. And we may not be around to see it, but this stuff is in a database, it's recorded, and we want somebody at some point either to reassess our data or to go in and say, yeah, let's go take a look at what those things are and see if we can document more about the pre-contact history in this state. So,
yeah, so basically, as Jim says, it can't show you the needle in the haystack, but it can show you the haystack. So we're honing in on where we're looking. And then the hope is that as LiDAR technology gets better and they have a way of penetrating water, we know what mounds look like. We know kind of where to look, and hopefully we could identify the one at White Oak Creek, get underwater divers to go in there and hopefully find where the Spanish visited in the 16th century, which was kind of the goal of mine and Jim's in the very beginning of the project.
So we would like to thank some of the folks, Tammy Steyer, Duke, who has retired now, I believe. Cody Yeager was their LiDAR technician that actually cut the data and shared it with us. And
Rick Duran is a community outreach person for Duke, I guess, a good friend of the university and the community here in Lancaster. And then
Paul Christensen is the one from Kershaw County who gave us their high resolution imagery so that we could, at least in that part of the lake, we could check our features against their 6-inch. They flew the whole county at 6 inches. So that's pretty good aerial photography. And he was gracious enough to give us a copy of that. And then Patricia at SKIA set us up with all kind of meeting spaces and accommodated us to have room to look at these things over time to do it. So we appreciate everybody's efforts in the process.